Hello, everyone. This is Teacher Toby here, and welcome once again to the Toby Nexus YouTube channel. Today, we'll be adding another video to our debate playlist, and we'll be focusing on Arguments 101, specifically crux, rebuttals, and rebuting. These are three most important things that you need to know when you're looking at arguments in debating. What we'll be looking at more specifically is what an argument is, what is the crux or main point of an argument, how to identify the crux of an argument, how to do rebuttals, example of what rebuttals look like, how to rebuild, an example of what rebuilding looks like before we end today's video. Okay, moving into it. So the first thing is, what is an argument? An argument is basically your idea plus reasons why your idea is true. And this is important because in debate, each side is trying to prove that their own side is correct, right? And so it's important that you provide valid reasons to the judges to believe your side. If you just accept that your side is true without providing any reasons, judges have no reason to believe you and you will most likely lose the debate. So, for example, let's say your idea is that school uniforms are good. Let's say that is your example of an argument, right? Now, reasons why this idea might be true could be that, school uniforms are good because they stop bullying, they make students equal, and all of that, right? Now, to make your argument sound much more solid, you can then go on to talk about how school uniforms do these things that are your reasons behind why school uniforms are good. So, how does school uniforms stop bullying? Then you can provide like a much more better explanation. How does it make students equal? You can provide a much more better explanation. All these things are what we end up calling in debating world analysis. So you have been able to analyze why the reasons that you say school uniforms are good are true, right? And you have been able to provide more explanation to the judges. What is the crux or main point of an argument? Now, just from the crux or main point, you already know that crux also has to do with like the most important part of an argument. It is the main idea that must be true for that argument to work. If that main idea is not proven, then the argument is flawed at the end of the day. A simple way to think of it is to say that if that particular part is wrong, then the whole argument falls apart. So, how then do you identify the crux of that argument? So, to be able to identify the crux of an argument, you need to ask yourself these questions anytime you're listening to a speaker giving their speech. The first question I need to ask yourself is, what is the speaker really trying to prove with their speech? Right? Because all speakers are trying to prove something. Majority of the times it might be just one particular thing that they are trying to prove. It could be probably why their side is good, why their side is much more important, or why people should prioritize their side. But then to prove that particular point, they will now have a lot of reasons or arguments to prove it. So majority of times you need to understand that and then look at the arguments if those arguments actually proves those particular things. Then the second question that you need to ask yourself is that out of all the reasons that they provide to support their side, which of the reasons is the most important, or which reasons matter the most? So, for example, you have an argument which is homework is bad because it takes too much time and makes students tired. My question to you guys is, what do you guys think the crux of this argument is? So at this point in the video, you can pause the video, take a minute or two to think about the answers, and then like play the video and hear the answer that I say after the question. Okay, so I'm guessing by this point you probably already have your answer down. So the main point of this particular argument is that homework is bad, but not just that it's bad for students. And so that's why in the beginning part of the argument you have homework is bad. But then the reasons that they put after that homework is bad is reasons particularly specific to students. So the main point is just to show how homework is bad for students at the end of the day. The next thing, which is rebuttal. Rebuttal is basically when you disagree with someone or someone's view and you provide reasons or explain why you disagree with them. Now, it's very important that you take into consideration the reasons. You have to provide reasons when you're doing rebuttal. If not, it just looks like you're just disagreeing with them without any valid reasons. And as such, in debate, the judges won't also take that your disagreement into any consideration because you do not provide reasons why your disagreements are even true or valid in the first place. So when you do rebuttals, you need to have reasons. But then specifically, when you do rebuttals, you are attacking the other team's main idea. So you are attacking the crux of the arguments that they have, right? And when you share rebuttals or how to identify rebuttals is that they usually start with things like I disagree because, or that is not true because. At the end of the day, after maybe they have already like identified which particular argument they are trying to rebut. So let's take an example of a rebuttal. So let's say that you have an argument which is basically concerning video games, that video games are bad because they make kids lazy. Now, a good rebuttal would be to say that, oh, that is not always true because some video games help kids think faster and solve problems better. And as such, if the motion is about deciding whether students should play or not play video games, and the opponent said they should not play video games because it's bad and make kids lazy, you could then add that since that is the major problem that your opponents are trying to solve, you can just then give students video games that will just help them to improve and make them study better at the end of the day. This is an example of a nice rebuttal that effectively takes down the main idea of the opponent, which is just probably to try as much as possible to prove why video games are bad for kids. Now, the next thing is rebuilding. And what does rebuilding just mean? Rebuilding means fixing your argument after it has been attacked. And rebuilding is mostly done by the second speakers in a team. Why? Because they would have probably listened to the attacks and rebuttals from the opponent's side, and then their job is to first of all respond to those guys, secondly defend your arguments, or at least try as much as possible to ensure that the ones that has not been taken down, they reinforce them or make them stronger so that the opponents rather cannot attack those ones at the end of the day, right? And so when you rebuild, you do three major things. The first thing is that you defend your idea. So your idea must have already suffered some attacks. You have to tell the judges that, oh, even with all these attacks that my idea has suffered, I still think it's true for the following set of reasons. The second thing is that you explain it better. And the reason why this is important is because sometimes what happens is that a lot of the times other debate teams try to be cheeky. They would rephrase your argument in a very bad way so that the judges think their own is better. And as such, when you see this happening, it's always important to let the judges know that this is not necessarily what you meant, or rather the way the other team is trying to portray it is not what you meant at the end of the day, and this is what your team was actually trying to do or prove, right? So that the judges don't misunderstand you guys' side. And then the last thing is that you add more reasons why it's true. So if they have been able to take down, or rather if you have provided 3 reasons why your argument is true initially in you guys' first speech, and they have been able to take down those 3 reasons, then and rather you know that you can't defend those ideas or you can't explain them better, then the next thing that you need to do is just add more reasons why it's true that cannot be taken down by your opponent. So that is why rebuilding is very important in any debate round, Because if you're not able to do those three things, then you're most likely not going to be able to defend yourself properly against the other team, which means that the other team are very likely to win the round at the end of the day. So let's take an example of rebuilding, right? So let's take the argument that we had before for the previous example, which is that video games are good. Let's take like an opposite of the arguments that we had initially, which is that video games are good because they are fun. And let's say in response to that particular argument, like a rebuttal, your opponent says that, we think, yeah, they are fun, but fun is not important, especially for students. Now, a good rebut case would be for the second speaker to explain why fun is important for students, because that's the major idea that proposition has, that the opponents are trying to rebut that major idea to say that, fun is not important. Now, the example of the rebut case to say that, look, fun is important because it helps children relax and reduce stress after school, which improves their mental health. So at the end of the day, because you have been able to show why fun is important and is even beneficial for students, the judges now have much more reasons to believe your case as opposed to the opponent's side at the end of the day. So basically, this is everything you need to know about arguments. There's still a lot more other concepts, or rather you could still dive a bit deeper into arguments, but I think if you're just entering into debating, just trying to know what arguments are about, this is everything that you need to know to just help you debate better at the end of the day. Thank you all for watching this video, and I do hope you have been able to learn one or two things. See you guys at the next one.